Do you think that this NAFTA 2.0 is a better NAFTA deal?
Well, it's difficult to say whether or not it's better. I think clearly there's enough in the revision to allow both countries to declare victory. So the United States, for instance, got increased access to Canada's dairy market. It got a much more stringent automotive rule of origin and a 16-year sunset clause. From Canada's point of view, they were able to preserve the NAFTA Chapter 19, which has now become Chapter 10 in the new agreement, which provides for binational panel review of U.S. trade remedy laws. And on an overall basis, we're able to avoid the massive disruption that would have taken place if Canada had dropped out of the NAFTA agreement. So I think we've got enough here that both countries can feel good walking away from the agreement, walking away from the renegotiation.
And David, to you, I mean, to what extent do you think this unwinds some of the concerns that we've had over trade and tariffs? And is this just a specific NAFTA story with these three countries, or can it actually be more broad and a blueprint for other trade negotiations with the U.S.?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting how this feeds into these tensions we're seeing, the trade tensions with China, because I think there's an expectation with the sort of volume of rhetoric that we've seen that you need to have a sort of go big or go home type of deal, and that's sort of certainly what we've heard around the scale of the challenge with China, around NAFTA, around Korea as well. But what we've actually seen from this deal, and I think with Korea last week as well, is more of a sort of small is beautiful picture, where these sort of fairly minor differences that Stephen's talking about are enough to sort of declare victory and go home. And I think in a way that's pretty good news potentially for what's coming forward with China, because certainly a scale of some of the objections we've seen from Robert Lighthizer would be pretty challenging to get out of China, whereas a much more small deal centred on intellectual property protections or something would be pretty doable.
Stephen, new agreement on Canada's steel and aluminum. Where do we go from here? Are you optimistic that some kind of agreement can be reached before or by November?
Well, this was one of the issues that the negotiators essentially set to the side. The working assumption at the onset was that once Mexico and Canada concluded a satisfactory NAFTA renegotiation with the United States, that an exemption to the steel and aluminum tariffs would be forthcoming. Thus far, it hasn't happened. We've been told that the discussions are underway aiming towards achieving that, but we'll have to wait and see if it actually materializes.
This is a step forward for North America, but it doesn't kind of reduce the trade tensions that we feel around the world. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd be careful about drawing too many overgeneralizations about the renegotiation of NAFTA to some of these broader tensions. The one thing I would say is that completing the NAFTA renegotiation certainly crosses a very important item off USTR's to-do list, and there now will be increased capacity to turn attention to some other countries and to some other issues if that's what the administration desires to do.